Over the following 6 weeks, I'm going to spend time learning to be as aware as possible to the present moment and see what impact this has on my brain.
So what mindfulness does is it can buffer stress. You become aware of challenges. Those more ruminative responses, a tendency to worry. We can't take away the pain of any stressful situation, but there's a sense of us being able to choose what the next step is. So the very first step within this is to say, yes, let's come back from this complexity to something that is relatively simple and stay with that. So finding this point where the breath is most vivid for you, and then following the breath, moving into the body and out of the body.
I feel calmer already. But my mind was is the idea to not let your mind wander. So I was thinking about like, oh, I need to send that email, I need to do this, and I was like, okay, no.
How interesting!
Think about breathing.
That's a really interesting observation. So first of all, we can feel that actually, as I'm doing this, I come to it with the intention to stay with the breath, to keep my attention on the breath. And actually, what happens? This is just what the mind does. It will wander off. That tells you about the working of the mind. That's something which is relevant. So we can simply go and say, that's what it is. We come back, go back to the breath, go back to the breath. So we do two things at the same time, if you like. We're strengthening our muscle for attention, for staying on the breath. And we're cultivating our capacity to come back, to be more flexible in our attention. We're also gaining insight into the working of the mind because we're realizing, this has come up.
After 6 weeks of meditation, kindly guided by Thorsten, I did feel a lot calmer. But would this feeling show up as a physical change in my brain?
We'll see.
After another brain scan, I went to Surrey University to find out.
This is very exciting to see my brain on the screen.
That's your brain, yes.
Do you see any results in my brain?
Yes, of course. We see changes in the brain. It's alive. It always changes.
I'm alive. That's a good sign.
That's a good sign. And we have some interesting changes that align with what we see in the literature.
I'm a sample size of only one, of course.
Yes, exactly. So we need to be cautious for all those who are scientifically minded. They wouldn't forgive us.
So what have you found?
We looked at the amygdala, that's in light blue, one of each in each hemisphere, and they are very important for emotional processing. And we see change in that region, particularly...
You do see change?
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah, the right amygdala is reduced in volume, and that's what you would expect as a stress reduction effect. So it gets bigger the more stressed we are. It's increased in people suffering from depression or anxiety disorders, and with mindfulness training we see that reducing in volume, and there's a hint of that in your data.
And I wasn't very stressed to begin with, but even so we see a tiny decrease, which is, I think that's quite exciting.
Exactly, yeah.
But that wasn't the only change he saw. He also found changes in my posterior cingulate cortex, a region involved in controlling mind wandering and rumination.
What was interesting to us was that we see an increase in the posterior region of this.
What's that?
Yes, in the darker blue. It's part of a wider distributed network in the brain, which is referred to as the default mode network. This system comes online when our mind wanders, and of course that's something which is very central to meditation. And we have seen in previous studies changes in this region, and that's exactly what we find in your data also, a small change in that direction.
Did it increase in size or decrease?
It increased in size, which should be an indication of an increased control.
So literally just by being mindful, I managed to increase a part of my brain that prevents my mind wandering too much.
Plasticity means that there's constant flux, so we would imagine that consistent input is needed.
So it sounds like I need to continue meditating and come back and see you in a year, and then we'll see some really significant things.
We would recommend, yes.
It's amazing to think that after just 6 weeks of meditation, there was a visible change in my brain, and that through repeated practice, I could further boost neuroplasticity by reducing stress.